Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. I've got a feeling today's going to be a good day because I'm in an Aston Martin. To give it its full name, it's a 2001 Aston Martin DB7 V12 Vantage Volante, which is possibly the longest car model name in the history of mankind. I bought this car recently from a viewer who kindly got in touch after I shared a post announcing that I was desperately looking for new stock. He bought this car brand new back in 2001 and kept it in his garage under a blanket ever since, only taking it out when the weather was nice. Hence why it's only done 27,000 miles in 20 years. It really was an exceptional find. It even came with the original tonneau cover which is in the boot, which I don't think has ever been used, and the original Aston Martin DB7 blanket, so that you can wrap it away all snugly in the winter. Today, during a gap in the rain, I thought I'd review it. So let's get cracking, shall we? For those of you who don't know, the Aston Martin DB7 has quite an interesting history. It made its first appearance at the Geneva Motor Show way back in 1993, with production starting the following year. Production ran from 1994 until 2004, when it was replaced with the new Aston Martin DB9. If you're a budding genealogist or amateur historian, you'll be able to trace the DB7's roots way back further than 1993, because this is actually based, quite loosely to be fair, on the Jaguar XJS, which has been around since the 70s. To understand the connection between the two, you've got to remember that at the time, Jaguar and Aston Martin were both owned by Ford, which explains all the part sharing, and there's an awful lot of that going on in the DB7, but I'll leave that for later. At the time, Aston Martin was struggling financially, so this car had to be a hit, and it was. The DB7 quickly became Aston Martin's most popular car. They sold over 7,000 of them. It was available as a coupe, which was gorgeous, or as a convertible, which was also gorgeous. Styling wise, I think it's a real beauty. It was designed by Ian Callum and Keith Helfet. It just oozes class and sophistication. It's just so elegant. Above all though, it's just cool. It's agonisingly cool. It just looks right in any setting. And wait until you hear that V12. I often use the word timeless to describe a car, but this Aston has made me realise that I've been throwing that word around willy-nilly. This is timeless. It's hard to tell which decade this car's from. I think it's aged beautifully, and will continue to do so. It's like a piece of fine jewellery. It'll never go out of fashion. It's a work of art. You ready for the sound? We'll do the old bypass test. Oh yes. Listen to that. 4,000, 5,000 RPM. It just sings. And that is the speed limit. There is a bit of wind and road noise, and I can hear a faint whistle from the pillarless door, but it doesn't seem as loud as something like a 911. Moving inside the DB7, the interior is quite snug, and to be fair, quite snug is putting it politely. It's a little bit cramped. I'm an annoyingly average 5'11", and even I've had to adopt a Snoop Doggy Dog laid-back driving position just so I don't hit my Tintin quiff on the Alcantara headlining. I think if you're above 6'2", you'd struggle to fit in. Unless, of course, you live somewhere like Miami or California where the roof will be down all the time. In that case, you'll be able to stick your head over the parapet and enjoy. There's also not much room for my left leg. And above all else, and this is very troubling, there are no cup holders. So my bottle of Evian has just had to place itself on the passenger seat. Sorry, Ignis, it's not your day, sunshine. Oh, that is just a symphony. Once you've shoehorned your way in, the seats are very comfortable, and the leather feels of the highest quality. You've got good lumbar support, you can adjust the seats electronically, so it's not too bad. To be perfectly honest with you, the interior is the worst aspect of the DB7. It all feels terribly outdated and antiquated. It all feels handmade, and I don't mean that as a compliment. Imagine if I were to go into my shed and knock up a coffee table using bits of old wood that I found. That's the sort of handmade I'm meaning. It feels like I'm in a low production run kind of car, if you know what I mean. It feels almost like a TVR actually. That's all before I mention the parts bin lucky dip. Take for example the rear lights that are off a Mazda 323F, the door handles that are off a Mazda, the door locks which are off a Ford, the window switches which are off a Ford Scorpio, the mirror switch which is off a Ford, same as my Mark 1 Focus. You get a very cheap looking 90s style Alpine radio cassette with an electronic aerial off a Ford Cortina. The The aerial's so unnecessarily large it could rival Jodrell Bank. It's all a bit low rent. However, you must remember that this was built during a very difficult time for Aston Martin. They had no money. Hence why they had to be quite plucky and make do and mend. I admire that. There's a certain doggedness about it. I was starting to get my head around the interior, which to be honest is a bit naff, and I was starting to sympathise with Aston. Then I found the original order form for this car. That's when I lost all sympathy. Have a guess how much this car was new. Now, I thought the Jaguar XK8, which came out a couple of years after this car, which looks very similar, I imagined they were around £50,000 or £55,000. So I thought the Aston, brand new, was probably 70, 75. No, £111,000 back in 2001. 111 grand. That's when I just lost sympathy, because I don't think this interior was ever worthy of a £111,000 car, even 20 years ago. In fairness, it is wrong to judge a 30-year-old design through 2021 lenses, but still, 111 grand. This is often the case with classics, or certainly modern classics. You fancy one, you talk yourself into it, take a look at the classifieds, have a look at the interior pictures, and then you notice a gramophone where the radio should be. It's even worse with newer cars that have screens because they date terribly. I mean, look at my O2 SL. The sat-nav's like an Etch-a-Sketch. These wipers are a bit irritating, aren't they? Luckily though for the DB7, you have the outstanding beauty of the exterior and that exhaust note that will send you weak at the knees. So very quickly, all is forgiven. I mean, listen to that. It's made all the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I've been driving this now all day, and initially I was driving it very gingerly, as if it were made from stained glass, because I thought it's a very old British car, therefore it must be fragile. But it isn't. It seems to be quite happy when you start to push it around a little bit. The engine wants to rev out. The steering's quite sharp, the brakes are quite responsive. It's all quite a surprise. That V12 engine note is unbelievable. Aston makes some of the best sounding V12s out there. It sounds almost like, how can I describe it? It sounds like a polite Lamborghini. It sounds like a Lamborghini that's been to finishing school. Do you know what I mean? Something else that surprised me is the performance. It still feels quick. Under the bonnet is a 6-litre V12, which is another example of more part sharing, because it's basically two Ford Duratec V6s welded together. But don't be a snob about that, because the results are astounding. It's naturally aspirated, so there are no superchargers or turbochargers, and it produces 420 horsepower. It'll do 0 to 60 in around 5 seconds, and keep going until it gets to about 180. Early examples came with a supercharged 6-cylinder, but if you're seriously looking for a DB7, I can wholeheartedly recommend the V12. Don't go for the gluten-free 6-cylinder. What you want is that V12. They're a dying breed. Get one while you can. This one has the optional sports exhaust, which was a £2,200 optional extra. Worth 2,200 quid in my opinion. Another good thing, this car turns heads, but in a good way. What's funny is you're driving through a village in this, you can see people's heads turning as they hear the V12, and their heads turn expecting to see something crass and vulgar. And when they discover that it's an Aston Martin in sky silver, they suddenly mellow. It's as if they're pleased to see it. Considering this is an old car with a chassis designed by Brunel, it doesn't feel like an old car. It certainly doesn't drive like one. There aren't any obvious or annoying rattles, and even the fabric roof does a reasonable job of keeping the sound out. Being a convertible, you'd expect there to be loads of flex and scuttle shake, wouldn't you? Well, there isn't really. Not noticeably, anyway. The boot's a reasonable size for a car of this nature. You also get 2 rear seats, which, alright, I've never actually met another human being that would comfortably fit back there. But it's extra storage, isn't it? Weirdly, there's no glove box, but you do get a lockable centre storage area here. In terms of running costs, this isn't the kind of car that you're going to want to do 20,000 miles a year in. Certainly not. Fuel-wise, around town you'll do 12 miles per gallon. On a run you should get 18 or 19. So it isn't what you'd call frugal. You'll stop caring about that. Road tax is cheap because they're all pre-2006, and insurance shouldn't be high because this is a proper classic car now, so it should qualify for classic insurance. Those brokers know that you'll only use it on high days and holidays, so the prices are usually quite reasonable. You can expect servicing costs to be on par with pretty much anything else of this type, although I should expect parts are quite expensive and relatively difficult to get hold of. So my advice, as always, is find a good specialist and stick with them. I've read that corrosion can be an issue, but if you find a good one that's always been garaged, then that shouldn't really be an issue. I've also heard that the air conditioning can be quite troublesome and expensive to repair, so make sure that all works before you commit to buy. They sold the DB7 as an automatic or as a manual. Now personally I would go for an auto, it's just easier to live with. And if all you want to do is hear that engine note on a nice sunny day with the roof down, then why bother changing the gears yourself? Plus I can't imagine the manual gearbox that pleasant to use. There's barely any room for my left leg as it is, so I can't imagine what it's like trying to operate a heavy clutch. I just know that the manual gear stick will be from the forward parts bin, the throws will be very long, and sometimes you won't get second. So I'd rather have an auto. If you go for a post-2001 model, then the automatics are a 5-speed unit, which do a reasonable job. As for whether you want the coupe or the convertible, and that's just down to personal preference. Personally, I think the coupe looks better, but I know that if I bought the coupe, there would be that one day in the summer where I'd really wish it was a convertible. So, horses for courses, isn't it? Used prices here in the UK have started to rise. 5 or 6 years ago, they were right at the bottom of the depreciation curve. I remember seeing nice ones going for less than 20 grand, and now that isn't the case. People have slowly realised the DB7's worth, and as such, prices are starting to head north. £30,000 will get you a decent example with average mileage. You'll pay a 5 to 10 grand premium for a low mileage one, but if you're looking for the holy grail, that one owner low mileage example, then be prepared to spend even more. One thing worth remembering though, which is true of any car of this nature that's starting to appreciate in value, it's a fairly safe place to park your money. I mean, think about it, if you've got a chunk of money in the bank in an ISA, it's earning you absolutely bugger all. But if you've got the garage space to park something like this, you can put that money into something like this, and your money's fairly safe. There's no chance it'll go down in value, it will only start to appreciate. And you've also got the benefit of being able to use it and enjoy it. It'd be easy to mock the DB7 with its Heinz 57 interior, but I think that's a bit unfair, because here is a car that's better than the sum of its parts. You know when you watch an old James Bond film with Sean Connery or Roger Moore, you can't help but laugh when you see one of the old gadgets, an old computer or an old tracker, because they're just woefully outdated. Still, that doesn't ruin the plot for you, does it? I think that's the best way to describe the DB7. The one thing you won't be prepared for though is the way it makes you feel. I've honestly never felt so suave, so sophisticated as behind the wheel of this DB7. I feel like a cross between Roger Moore and Brian Ferry. Aston Martin is without doubt the coolest brand on the planet. So I think that pretty much sums up the DB7. So thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'll leave the link below. If you've got any comments or questions, let me know below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Make sure you check out the High Peak store, www.highpeakstore.co.uk, where we've got new items arriving all the time. I've just had another shipment of calendars because we sold out of the first lot, so thank you to everyone who's bought one of those. And yeah, cheers guys, I'll see you next time.